home. It's 8:30. We're all in the same time zone, and I'm really happy about that. We're here tonight with Sensei David Goldberg. And Sensei, I want to start with a question that we will expand around. Everybody here works in some level with the sword, and you make them. And we're going to break that all open throughout the show. But as somebody who also is a high level in Aikido, do you think someone can truly understand the roots of Aikido who doesn't understand the sword?
That's a great question. I believe the sword and Aikido go hand in hand. We practiced in Aikido with bokken, shoto, wooden swords. Uh, I'm lucky enough to have been involved in Iaido for many years. When I first got my shodan in Aikido, I started in Iaido in a Muso Shinden-ryu form, and I've been studying ever since. I believe, to answer your question, you must know the sword in order to really understand truly our type of martial arts, maybe all martial arts. I know that people do uh, Budo with, excuse me, with wooden swords and wooden staffs and old boat oars and things like that, like Musashi did. I don't really understand some of those arts. I know the Jo very well. I know bokken, shoto, and two sword. We do a lot of Mito-ryu and then Iaido, of course.
And so, what do you consider the need to be? I mean, some people are more familiar with an Aikido than others, but why, especially in your art, would that be fundamental?
Well, the movement, the irimi, the entering, the tenkan, the changing direction or turning and entering and changing. I believe the distancing with the sword is extremely important. If you can, I practiced with many Aikidoka over the years, and a group that I practice with don't use the long blade. They use two bokken, or they call them bokuto, shotos, and the woman that was teaching, very talented, above my rank actually, but I could cut her hip off every single time. And I believe that the swordsmanship, learning the swordsmanship with a bokken and a live blade, or at least the Iaido, is essential in our arts. Absolutely. For distance, for timing, for movement.
Right on. I want to go around on this topic, and I love what you said. Maybe all arts. So, Sensei Suino, let's go to you next. Um, we all defer to you for the sword here, the four of us hosts. Do you believe that that knowledge is necessary either for all arts that come out of Japan or Okinawa, or at least for your grappling arts?
I don't know if I want to say it's necessary. It's certainly important. Um, and I think if you're gonna have a complete understanding of those arts, historically and theoretically, it's pretty close to necessary. Historically, because that's where they come from, right? We know that the meme is the samurai fought with bow and arrow, then with swords, then with knives, then with what we now call jujitsu. Um, that's a way oversimplification, but that's kind of the understanding. But also, so many of the techniques in Aikido, in Nihon Jujitsu, and even in Judo, are so closely tied in terms of how the body's used, how you think, how distancing is established to swordsmanship techniques that yeah, it's pretty important. I've talked about Sato Tadayuki Sensei on this show before. He's a professor of martial arts at Waseda University. Actually, it's a different position now, but when he comes and teaches seminars to us, half the seminar is, hey, here's a throw, which it might be a Aikido throw. Hey, here's a pin in Nihon Jujitsu, and here's the analog, right? Or vice versa. The sword technique and the Jujitsu is the analog of the sword.
Mm.
So um, it's it's really it's really important. I'm not going to say somebody can't learn an empty hand martial art with absolutely without learning the sword, but it's really important.
Sensei Dauphin, I'll go to you next. Obviously you do the BJJ, which is derived from the Samurai Jiu-Jitsu, but also I was training with you a lot around the time you were starting to adopt the sword very seriously, and I watched it change your karate. So not just for grappling arts that we know kind of come through that lineage, but for stand up as well. Is the sword an essential part of that?
The only problem I have is essential with your question, Sean. Like, not if you said something like, is it important? Is it beneficial for all arts? I would say 100%. Um, I think it's essential for some martial arts. Like if you talk to Sean DeJong, who does jiu-jitsu, he through his learning Iaido through us, he's like, man, I wasn't even getting in and out of Seiza properly. Um, you know, so for him, I think it's very essential. I think it's super beneficial for anybody. For me, what you're talking about, I think, is the structure that Iaido taught me, like the skeletal structure that Iaido taught me. It applies so well to karate. When I think of BJJ and the way, you frame your body when you're trying to keep a huge individual off of you, like that structure, that framing, that skeletal framing, and not that physical strength, that that skeletal framing that you get from Iaido, you can't beat it when it comes to certain elements, right? Like in karate, what I would say is, we know that Okinawa karate was adopted into Japan and became a Japanese martial art when Okinawa was pulled in, but it didn't really have the same evolution that mainland Japan had. But the one thing that it did have was samurais showing up in Okinawa with swords and people without swords trying to defend themselves against that. So, on that element on its own, learning the sword as a karate practitioner would at least give you some element of history of, why your kabuto and why your karate came about, right? So, I think that's very important.
Right on. Hanshi Legacy, if anybody's an adherent to the ways of Matsumura, it's you. And then he also carried a sword, we know. How important is the sword in your life, or do you believe it is to all martial arts or Shorin Ryu?
I think all martial arts make you grow internally the same. Um, but I'm going to assume that we've all seen Toshiro Mifune and those type of movies. And there's a scene in one of them, I'm not sure if he's in it, but there were two people fighting. One was an amateur, he was all excited. And um, then there was this guy who just stood back in is that kame or in a dragon tail position. And there were a bunch of people standing there, and the older man who seemed to be the master, he said to the other guys, "This fight has this encounter is already over."
Hmm.
Just by the way he was standing there. So, and then now I'm going to relate that to martial arts. Last night in one of my classes, we were doing the Pinan katas, translated as peaceful mind, and I was talking to my students about it, and they said, "Where does the peaceful?" I was talking about Pinan Godan, how you break the person's neck. um, so he says, "Well, how does peaceful mind transition into this?" And to go back to the swordsman, I stood three of us in front of the mirror, and I said, "Look in the mirror," and I moved just my little finger a little bit, and I said, "Did you see that?" When two didn't, one guy said, "Yes, I did." I said, "That's where the peaceful mind comes in. But you have to stand there and be completely peaceful where nothing else is moving, so that if there's all of a sudden a movement, you will pick it up easily." So I believe that type of training is like the superior training. Even in same thing with whether you're going to wield a sword or you're going to wield a punch or a kick or a boken. So I would say definitely good training.
Thanks, Hanchi. Before we go back to you, Sensei Goldberg, I just want to throw in, I agree with you, Sensei Dofa. I mean, I'm the least proficient swordsman on this call, but I think there's a world of martial arts that's Japanese or Okinawan that can't not know those roots, but I'm not sure how much it would have mattered to the arts I do more if I hadn't, but I will never know. But there's no world in which a sword isn't part of martial arts for me. Maybe that's just childhood movies or the roots in the samurai. Sensei Goldberg, is there anything you want to add now that we've gone around the horn on this? Has anything stimulated a agreement, a disagreement, a thought?
Well, I'm very grateful for all of your expertise, and I agree with Legacy Sensei. I agree with all of you. I really was impressed with what you said, Sensei Legacy, about how you have to be able to notice when you moved your little finger and one of your students had noticed that. Through training in Aikido so closely with Mitsugi Saotome Sensei for so many years, one picks up these subtleties that aren't spoken. It's what's between the lines, I suppose, is the way my wife says it. And I find that by paying attention and being quiet and relaxing and sending my energy focused and completely in attention, I find these subtleties really help us grow. And I feel just honored to be able to be in the company of my teacher, be his student. Saotome Sensei is a true master. And I've been very fortunate to train with other people of high level. And it's an honor to be sitting here with you, I guess, as I said before, but it's really quite awesome that, I'm sitting here with you guys talking about things that I do, and thanks for inviting me.
We're so glad you're here and we're honored as well. And before we go to our intros, I just want to maybe throw between you and Sensei Suino the concept of that wordless transmission. I mean, that's fundamentally how Sensei Suino learned his sword art. And if I'm not mistaken, it's within the name of your art, Sensei Suino. And do you maybe want to talk about that for a second? We'll go back to you, Sensei Goldberg.
Are you looking for any particular?
No, I just really like the way he said the unspoken things you learn. And, I know that that's very specifically how you learned.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was always the understanding that this idea of direct transmission was vital, that you can't learn real martial arts from a book or from a video. And honestly, I don't believe you can learn real martial arts by hopping from one teacher to another. I think a seminar martial arts career is not the same as a martial arts career dedicated to one teacher for as long as that relationship can be maintained. There are things that you could describe if you worked hard enough outside the techniques, and then there are things that are ineffable that I don't think you can describe that you get from your teacher. I've said this many times. Yamaguchi Sensei was the man who showed me what it meant to be a martial artist and a man, and it was not demonstrative or macho in any way, but it was profound. And that's the best of the martial arts training that there is. As much fun as we might have in a hard rolling session, a great fight, anything else, to me, a long-term relationship with an extraordinary martial artist has an element of direct transmission that I don't think can be achieved in any other way.
Sensei Goldberg, take
I,
us to your intro with your thoughts on that or your own experiences.
well, I agree with Sensei Suino wholeheartedly. Saotome Sensei often says, "My skin remembers O Sensei," because he was a living student of Ushideshi for Morihei Ueshiba for 20 years. And he says, "So you touch me, you touch O Sensei." And that always struck me in my heart, as this connection that I have, or that we have, my fellow practitioners with Sensei, he says, "My skin remembers, so then you feel my skin." And I'm grateful for that. It's such a pleasure to train with people as Suino Sensei said, the same people for so many years. You really get this brotherhood, this sisterhood, this ingrained connection, this family connection. We're all on this Michi, the all-encompassing path. And in your individual paths, our individual paths, the Do that I practice, the Do that you practice, I think that everything that we do on our individual do connects us to the Michi. And I'm so grateful to have the brotherhood and the sisterhood and the teachers that I have been lucky enough to be with all these years.
Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. We're off to a banger of a start. My name is Sean Benson, like I said. I'm one of your hosts. And before I introduce the other hosts, if you're watching live on our Zoom, you're part of our living history. And we ask that you chip in with your questions for Sensei Goldberg or for any of us around the topic that we're discussing, but we definitely want to keep our guest in the spotlight. And if you're with us on any podcast or on YouTube, live or otherwise, hit that subscribe, hit that like, and as I've been saying lately, argue amongst yourselves in the comments because we want to see what you agree, but we also want to see what you disagree with. I mean, we get to know each other pretty well, and sometimes we can say the same thing a bit. We want to hear what you think that we're saying is bullshit, and we'll bring those topics up in future shows. That would be really exciting for us. I'm here with Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Nicolas Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy, and what we just talked about, the touch. I met Hanshi Legacy 32 years ago. He's been my teacher, and Sensei Dauphin has been my training partner for 32 years, but my sensei for 29. I'll be with them for life. Sensei Suino, I met not long after, probably 28 years I've known you. And then insofar as another art, you're the first person to gi choke me on the ground. And, when I think about the kinesthetics I felt from all of you, that's what like. Who you are is who I love the most, but we're doing a martial art together. And I think, especially with you, Sensei Dauphin, all that time in the park and the squash courts, if I'm any kind of fighter, it's not from knowledge, it's from unconscious knowledge through trying to avoid being hit by you. And I just want to say how grateful I am that you've provided a path for life, and I get to call you my teachers and my friends and my brothers. Sensei Dauphin, what do you want to say about our guest tonight to introduce him?
I'm excited to introduce Sensei Goldberg. He before the call, he was saying, "Oh, I'm a lowly rank." Well, he said, "I'm a lowly fifth dan in Aikido. That's a high rank in my opinion, and a fourth dan in Iaido." I gotta say that's a high rank because that's the same rank I have, Sensei Goldberg. So I think that's a good high rank. Um, he's also a master swordsmith, which I know we're all excited to talk about. He's got 38 years of professional experience crafting custom Japanese swords and restoring historical blades. Uh, his work has drawn acclaim from martial artists, collections, celebrities alike, including, and I'm going to butcher some of these names, Sensei Goldberg, so please correct me
No
at the
worries.
right. I don't speak Japanese. Sensei Suino, if you watch, he'll always smirk as I'm trying to say these words because he speaks Japanese much better. But so his collections, he's received acclaim from people like uh, Mitsugi Saomoto Sensei,
Saotome.
thank you, Hiroshi Ikeda Sensei. This
Ikeda.
one I can say, Robin Williams, and numerous other enthusiasts. I want to know like how Robin Williams fits into this list. But Sensei Goldberg majored in three-dimensional design, sculpture, and art in college. Um, it was in 1987 that he began his formal study of sword making, and by 1995 had become a full-time sword maker. His work is informed by years of training under noted masters such as C. Robin Hudson, Michael Bell Sensei, and the traditionally licensed Japanese smith Fusa Taro and the Kanafuzi lineage. A national audience recognized Sensei Goldberg's excellent skills when he won Forge and Fire Season 1, Episode 4. Go check that out. Right. It's pretty cool. His swords are celebrated as both functional tools and breathtaking works of art, blending ancient tradition with modern innovation. Although he's a master level sword maker himself, Sensei Goldberg remains a student. I know that will make Sensei Legacy happy, and visits Japan regularly to further his skills and refine his techniques with his colleagues and teachers. Thank you so much, Sensei Goldberg, for coming on to the show tonight. Really excited to talk to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited. Happy to be here.
Sensei, we're going to jump right in with the question that we, after our intro, start with everybody. What was it like for you growing up, and what brought you into the martial arts?
Well, as a boy, my father was on in D-Day on the ground and moved into Omaha Beach. And after the war was over, he brought back a samurai sword, and I grew up with it in my closet and looked at it periodically with respect as I could as a child. But I really got interested in the martial arts because, watching Bruce Lee and, of course, other martial artists, Chuck Norris and the Kung Fu show, things like that, growing up. But I started to train in Okinawan Kempo, and in Reading, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, outside of Philadelphia. And I didn't really meld into it very well. I think it might have been my own personal, I don't want to blame the teacher. It wasn't the head teacher, it was an ancillary school, but I didn't click with it so much. Then I tried Taekwondo, and the Sabam Nim there was very talented. He was like a panther. He was really extremely amazing. I didn't really enjoy the showmanship of the bricks breaking and the things like that, I just didn't resonate with that well. Then when I was in college, I was very close friends with a guy named Kurt Sussman who studied Bruce Lee style. And he was extremely talented. And he helped me to understand being calm, even though I wasn't trained to be calm, and told me about different ways to approach being relaxed. Then after school, I was at a fellow fraternity house at Albright College in Reading, PA. And one of the frat brothers was stretching out on the floor in the early evening. And I said, "What are you doing, Nate?" He says, "Oh, I'm getting ready to go to Aikido." I said, "What's Aikido?" I went with him and I watched class and I joined the next class. And that was 1983.
So one of the things I love asking, because some of us I think all of us had the same experience, but like you go one class, you join the next class, and you're a lifer. When did you know and why? What was it? What was the vibe? What was the feeling in 1983 of that room?
Well, we had a funky little dojo in the corner of a basketball court on a rollout, wrestling mat. There were 6 of us in the class. I was the most beginner, and we didn't wear hakama till Shodan in that school. So there were a couple of blue belts, a couple of brown belts, and the sensei. He had a hakama on, and then me. And he asked me to punch him, and he threw me in a kodagaish, and then proceeded to stretch my arm with my face on the mat, as is common in that throw. And I was hooked. I couldn't move. He did stretch my shoulder out pretty bad. Couldn't move my arm for 2 days, but that was because of my attention, not his. And so I just joined, and I just fell in love with it. Aikido, I was enamored with Aikido, and just the sheer hanmi and the stance and the steadiness and the relaxation and the extension of energy, it blew me away. I had no idea it existed.
And you've done another martial art up to this point. So, what was it that made you go, okay, I can respect Kempo or not, whatever your feeling is, but this is mine?
I don't think I had, I didn't find myself in the right school. If I would have joined with Legacy Sensei or any of you, high level fellows, I probably would have stayed in that art. But I think because of my personality, I'm like the happiest guy. I'm always smiling. And my dear friend Wolf Sensei told me the same about Suino Sensei. He's always happy. He's always saying hello and making sure people are feeling good. It's me too. I mean, I'm at the grocery store and I'm talking to the checkout girl and making sure she's feeling good, and it's just my way. So I think that Aikido I tapped into something that just really resonated with me completely as a whole package.
And it sounds like, and we've talked about this with other guests or with each other on host chats, the teacher was fundamental to that, right? Like the art, yes, but it sounds like you were shown something in a way perhaps that first teacher didn't. Tell us a bit about your teacher and who they are and what.
My present teacher?
Well, your teacher then when you joined that was able to open up this way in the way another teacher might not have been able to?
I started practicing with a fellow who is a very high level. He was very high level. He was from the Bronx, and he was a tough guy, street guy, very high level karate man. And then when I joined his dojo, he was Sandan in Aikido, and it was under the organization with Shuji Maruyama Sensei in the Kokikai organization, and it was very good. And I actually ended up becoming the senior student in that school. Stayed with him for a long time. He was a very good man, very strong, very good technique, very martial. Then later on, I was in Manhattan with an old college roommate having some beer and playing pool one afternoon, right near Bond Street in the Village. And there was a famous dojo there, the Bond Street Dojo. And I said to my buddy, hey, there's a dojo down the street. I heard it was really cool. I want to go see. And he, shot me the bird and said, get out of here. I'll see you later, maybe. And I went down to the dojo and I walked in right before lunch. And I walked in and there was 100 hakama lining the mat on the edge, and Saotome Sensei sitting on Uke's back with his leg in a leg lock, talking to the class. And I come in and I immediately drop the seiza, and everybody looks at me and then looks back at Sensei because I made noise coming in the dojo. And I was just so blown away with how he was as a teacher and the way he commanded the presence he commanded. After class, I watched the last technique, and then I'm sitting on the side bench, and after class, Saotome Sensei came down, sat beside me, and his hakama, actually, he didn't take it off yet, and fired up a dart, a cigarette. And first time I saw someone smoke a butt in the dojo, and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Who I was and who I practiced with." And he says, "Oh yes, I know him. I know Maruyama. They joined Hambu Dojo at the same time, same year, the year I was born, 59. Anyway, so he says, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to come practice. This is a nice place, and you seem like a great teacher." He says, "Okay." And he got up and went to the changing room. He walked out of the changing room in a floor-length denim duster with a cowboy hat and a cowboy shirt and a bolo tie and boots. And on the back of his duster was an eagle patch this big. And I was like, oh, this guy, it's cool. And so he walks out of the dojo and I run out after him. And I'm running up the street behind him. I said, "Sensei, Sensei." He turns around. It's like Clint Eastwood in the sunset with the duster, moving around. And I said, "Sensei, I want to practice Aikido with you." He says, "You go here. This is a good dojo." And he turned around and walked up the street. I was hooked.
That's fantastic. That is such a Manhattan in the 80s kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. So then as you're going along, at what time did you start to look at the design stuff in college? And then did that lead you directly to the sword? I mean, was this sword in your closet always kind of vibrating or?
Well, answer your question, yes, it was vibrating in a spiritual way to me my whole life, but I didn't realize what that vibration was until I got into maybe Shodan in Aikido, and I started to train Iai then. Once I got the Shodan in Aikido, I found Muso Shinrin-ryu, and I was really enamored with Muso Shinrin-ryu, and Takachi Mitsuzuka Sensei was our first teacher. May he rest in peace. He walked the Rainbow Bridge a number of years back, but his son, Munehiro Mitsuzuka, runs the organization along with Warehan Shihan, Roger Warehan Shihan. And it's a real, I guess, honor, certainly, to be involved with these people that are so high level and so dedicated to this path, like all of you gentlemen. I mean, sure, I've dedicated myself my whole adult life to Aikido and to sword making. When I went to college, I studied three-dimensional design, as you mentioned, Dauphin Sensei. And when I got into the sword art after Aikido as well, I thought, I said to Sensei, my first Sensei, Maruyama Sensei, "Sensei, I went to school for art and I really love swords. I think I could be a sword maker." And he said, "Oh no, Desan, can't do it." So I took the challenge. I went to Japan.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. I went to Seki and I found a teacher, and the old guard wouldn't teach Gaijin. But the younger guys would. You have to be licensed in Japan. I'm sure you guys know, but the audience may not. You have to be licensed in Japan to make swords. And there's a collective that makes the tamahagane in a big tatara, like a big government controlled tatara. And you go and buy your couple of kilos of metal, and then you go back to your shop and make your swords. Some guys do make their own tamahagane. I learned all about everything making my tamahagane, and also sword making from Fusataro in Seki, but there were many things that he taught me that he said, Dave-san, this you can't show anybody. This is ours, our lineage. Please keep this to yourself. So when I teach certain clay techniques, I don't teach the very sacred techniques to anybody, because I was asked not to. And I have respect, integrity as being good while no one's watching, you know? So I just teach it, like you can look it up on YouTube and I'll teach it that way, you know? But I'm very, very fortunate to have been able to come back from my accident and have all my knowledge intact about sword making and about Aikido and about Iaido. And also the love that I have for my lovely wife, Morna O'Neill Goldberg, the most beautiful woman in the world. I'm so happy that I have this opportunity to lead my life this way. I get to make swords for a living and get paid well. It's so cool. I mean, how cool is that? It's like a kid's dream, right?
I want to back up to something that has little to do with martial arts, but you're extremely humble. You've been doing this as long as some of us on this call. You've been doing it for your life, other than an accident, which we can talk about. But you're so deferential. Did you learn that? Is that something that martial arts engenders in you? I mean, you're a master of this. You've won sword or metal building contests and still defer. And is that a humility from the martial arts, or is that innate?
I imagine it's from the martial arts, and I believe my personality from my mother. May she rest in peace. My dear mother, Claire. She was the happiest woman I ever met in my life. And she only dropped the F-bomb on me once when I was 16, because I rolled my Suzuki and broke my bottom bone in my left arm. You're selling that motorcycle right now. And but she was my guiding light. My mom was fabulous. My dad was great too. My dad was an artist. He was a painter, prolific painter. So I grew up in an art family. And my mother was a thespian. She was an actress, local, syndicated, but local. And so I grew up around that. And my stepfather was a musician. So I learned to play the trumpet, went into the marching band. So I got a lot of influence from the family.
I love that. Hanshi, I just want to ask you this question. We're not going to go around the horn, but you also, I find, to be exceedingly humble for a guy who's hit a peak within the martial arts. And is that something you think the martial arts has given you, or was that innate for you as well?
Funny you should ask me that. Uh, I would say that being humble is like understanding your art. Because before that, you're always trying to tell everybody, or you try to always act the part. Once you reach that, it's nothing like you thought it was. So you just become that. And that's the internal teachings of martial arts. And being quiet about it always puts you in advantage of when you're in a fighting art. So and my own daughter says to me, since I've started karate, she goes, Dad, have you ever mellowed out? She says that to me all the time. So I think it's part of the understanding.
Yeah. And this isn't quite what I think you just said, but I know, as a guy who races cars, the more you race cars, the less you need to drive fast on the street. Because
That's
you
right.
can't even approach what the track offers, so you don't even try.
Yes.
Sensei Goldberg, I want to go back. Oh, Sensei Dauphin just texted me something that you've said, Hanshi. Everyone thinks they're a little better than they are. And I think the arts is really good at teaching you. Maybe you're not. There's always someone better. Sensei Goldberg, I want to ask one question, and then I want to break open something you said earlier, which is maybe some of the viewers don't know about sword stuff. I don't. So I want to ask you one question, and then I want you to break down the process. Because as we were doing some research and I was watching some stuff you on YouTube, like it's astonishing to me that you buy clay and create a sword. So we'll get into that in a moment. But did you undergo what can be common a spiritual purification ritual to be someone who could be given this honor of building swords at this level?
Well, I do rituals on my own. In Japanese, Sensei Suino knows Hitori Day, alone. And you know, I I haven't done this in a long time, but I used to do a lot of the ice cold buckets of water, or I get into the creek. I used to have a dojo in Fort Washington, and there was a creek running by it. And at the Kagami Baraki, at the beginning of the year, we would go out and put buckets of water over our heads. So symbolically, I have done some ritual, but I do a lot of breathing on my own and meditation. And my meditation is my meditation. I don't really know what meditation is other than what I've discovered on my own. A lot of my contemporaries and senpais have studied and done meditation, and I really enjoy working alone. I often have deshi in the studio with me the Tanren and the smithy. I usually have one or two all the time, and they of course they rotate, fluctuate. Different people come and go. I'm very, very fortunate. My first Iaido teacher, Takashi Mitsuzuka, may he rest, his son runs the organization, and his grandson, Mitsuzuka's grandson, or this present Mitsuzuka Sensei's son, is my deshi. And he comes to me and spends 3 days a week here in the house and learns with me in the studio. And that's quite an honor and also a lot of fun. And he also is Japanese, so I get to practice my Japanese, which is really nice. And I'm learning so much, as much from him as he's learning from me, I think.
Um, so what is the importance of any version of a spiritual purification? Where does that play into going and making a cutting weapon?
Well, I think that the respect for this, let's call it gorgeous, bejeweled killing weapon, or a weapon that can slice you from shoulder to hip in one swing. There's a certain respect that develops in a person. Now, I know for sure training it with a live blade changes your perspective than training with a bokken or uh, an Iaido, because you revere the edge. I started practicing with a live blade when I got to Shodan in Iaido, and certainly sliced myself up quite a bit doing Nutsuke and Noto. But I think that the respect for the weapon, the reverence, you revere it as you grow, and the less you end up hurting yourself, and the more you keep all the red stuff on the inside, is it helps you to refine yourself. I, because of my job, I cut myself and poke myself and grind myself all quite a bit. I have super glue and band-aids that I use a lot.
You and bartenders.
Yeah, right. My son is a professional uh, bartender, and he cuts himself sometimes too.
Yeah, right. Um, so I actually just wrote down something you said, and it might be the title of my autobiography, Revere the Edge. And for me, it's not about swords, but maybe living there too much. But I want to go around the horn with each person. So Sensei Dauphin, I'll start with you. What changed when you worked with a live blade? And do you practice or believe in spiritual purification as part of martial arts?
Man, the second question is a tough one. When we were talking about it, the thing I was thinking about um, was something that I've said before, that inherently there's no evil sword. It's a sword, and only the person who picks it up um, they transfer their intentions into the blade when they train with it or when they use it. That could be the same of anything, a bow, a firearm. You know, if you just put a sword in the middle of the floor and nobody ever touches it, it won't ever do anything negative or positive, quite frankly. So when we were talking about that, that's what I was thinking about for spiritual purification. I was thinking about the person that wields the sword, right? They need to be upright and the right type of person.
Mm.
What was your question about the live blade, Sean? What did you?
Well, just he mentioned that, you know, once you start to work with a live blade, it changes everything. It changes your perspective, and that's where the concept of purification might be necessary.
Right. So it does change things because, as he said, you want to keep the red stuff on the inside. You probably don't remember the first time you did Iaido with me by the side of your, um,
I've got a photo, and I revere that photo.
yeah, but do you remember that I told you to use a bokken and you said, no, I want to use, you had this cheap live blade that you wanted to use. And I said, don't use that. You're going to hurt yourself.
Yep.
And you did hurt yourself and
Yep.
you're bandaged up after that. Um, so I think you need to be at a certain level to use a live blade. And then, uh, a live katana, just like a firearm, these things can hurt you. So they require a much higher, level of awareness while you're using it, right? Because you can hurt yourself with it. Like people always think about, oh, I can hurt somebody else with this thing, but most likely you're going to hurt yourself with it. You're probably in today's day and age, you're not going to hurt somebody else. You can hurt yourself with it. But I do think that heightened level is very important if you're going to achieve higher levels in a particular martial art that employs a weapon like a sword.
Yeah. I think we have a new thing to say to each other when we're taking a drive. Keep the shiny side up and keep the red stuff on the inside. Anchi Legacy, I want to go to you with this question. What has changed when you've held a live blade versus a practice blade or a bokken? And do you practice or believe a spiritual purification is necessary as part of any of these arts?
I'm not deep enough into EI to get into this conversation, but I will tell you this: when I was 24 years old or so, I walked into a gun shop and there was a Wakizashi in there, and I traded the guy a Derringer and $132 for it because that's all the money I had.
Good
And
deal.
it's from the 1650. I sent it into Dr. David Pepper at Toronto, and he told me it was from around 1650.
Nice.
And I believe, as everyone probably knows, that a wakizashi is made from a katana that's been used or damaged on the third part of uh, cutting edge. And I have it right now. And my question was going to be, I was going to ask you if you could have a look at it and maybe fix it. But
I would do it.
yes,
I would fix it. Yes.
yeah. So it makes you realize I do EI to calm my mind, and like in doing kata, you're supposed to imagine how many times can you experience killing somebody? How do you know you can stand there in a real fist fight? The guy's got a knife that you have the intestinal fortitude to try to finish that person off. So when you have a life blade, I think you cross that threshold, and you realize that I've got to realize that I'm responsible for what this sword does. Exactly what Sensei Goldberg said. So when you understand, then your mind changes. When you don't understand, that's your beginning part. You'd wheel that around and cut other people in the room and cut yourself in that. But once you understand the art, I believe that you're more reserved. That's where the calmness comes from.
And does that overlap with any kind of spiritual purification, Hanchi?
I don't know about that part. I don't quite understand the fullness of what you're talking about there.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Dauphin, I know you want to chip in one more before we go to Sensei Suino.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking when Sensei was talking about that is I think martial arts innately, if you're with a good teacher, does start to spiritually purify you as you train in it, right? It's just it does this thing to you. But the one thing I wanted to just share, Goldberg Sensei, you might laugh at this. I remember the first time I got a Shinken, I went to Sensei Suino and said, "Hey, Sensei, I think I want Shinken, but I'm not sure if the reasons are good." And he said, "Well, what do you think your reasons are?" And I said, "Well, I've been training with you now for like 15, 16 years, and I don't own a sword that I could actually like kill somebody with." And he said, "I think that's a great reason. We need to."
Um, I don't know a ton about live versus Iaido. Like Sensei Dauphin said, far too early, I was using a maul sword that can cut like wood, like it cuts branches, but it's a very indelicate weapon. I always wanted to use something that was real to know what I was dealing with. So that's my extent with that. But with spiritual purification in any art, I think about it only once I started teaching. And it's not like I can be a perfect individual, but I do that through an amends process so that if I make mistakes, I own my part in it. I apologize to people. And the reason that's so important to me is because I would hate for one of my students, I'd run into someone and they're like, you blah, 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 and I haven't dealt with it. And then now my student's getting a skewered view of an art because I'm an imperfect human. So I like the idea that there's no one I could run into on the street who would tell my wife something or my friend something they don't already know. And that's my version of being spiritually pure, so that at least my students, knowing I'm imperfect, don't have their experience sullied by those imperfections because I've already amended for them. Sensei Suino, live blade, what's the diff? Does it matter? And how pure, sir, is your spirit?
Well, I don't know how pure my spirit is.
Shame, shame.
We're all a work in progress, especially me. Um, uh, gosh, let me go to the spiritual question first. I guess I'm a bit of a romantic in this. I do believe that there's such a thing as an act of purification. Sensei Goldberg alluded to it earlier. I think there's washing, there's breathing. I don't think you need those things. I think those are acts that help you get there. I think there's lots of ways to take an act that is mundane and make it into a sacrament.
Mm.
I think there's lots of ways to do that. And we do it routinely in the martial arts. We bow to the shomen, respecting our traditions. We bow to each other. And we put ourselves in a state of mind where I think what that means is we put ourselves in the state of mind where we are open to the to as much of the truth as we can take in when we're doing that activity. So that means putting aside a lot of preconceptions, a lot of ego, a lot of sense of competition in many cases, although competition can bring you there as well. Uh, but I think that through ritual or through the desire and practice of becoming emptying your cup, I think that's a spiritual act, and it makes the work we do more sacred.
Live blade.
Live blade.
Live blade.
Live blades are sharp, and you better pay attention. So it kind of focuses. It does a little bit of what I just said. It helps you focus, both in a very practical way to stay safe, yourself and others. Um, Live blades, usually a good live blade has a different feel in your hands, so there's a different technical aspect to it. Um, uh, I mean, ultimately, it's necessary to have and to hold, and to wield. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to say. You got to have one, and you should be good enough to merit using it.
Thanks for that. So Sensei Goldberg, now we're getting to a question that, to be honest, like this incredible conversation has in many ways been prelude to. Talk us through what it is to make a sword and also take us to how that lands you on TV shows doing this. And before we do, for people watching, type in David Goldberg sword on YouTube and the comments. There's not one comment, Sensei Goldberg, that isn't in awe of the work you do. You've got people in the comments going, I'm now dreaming of owning one of these.
Wow.
I look at a
No,
lot
it's
of
funny. I didn't look at. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
I looked at that.
oh no, there's nothing you can post on YouTube where somebody isn't like, fuck that guy, that sucks.
All right.
You don't have that comment. You've achieved a version of sort of accepted wonder at what you're doing. So I just want to say that for the people watching is, after this show, go watch that. But talk us through the process from base minerals and fire and
Sure.
get
My
these.
pleasure. I just want to preface it by saying this piece. Saotome Sensei teaches us the concept of Satsu Jinken, Katsu Jinken, the life-taking sword and the life-giving sword. And I like to believe that even though my swords can be Satsu Jinken, I make the Katsu Jinken. I make the sword that gives life. And from all the things that you master senseis have said about the way you learn and what you learn and how you present yourself to your arts, I feel that certainly a sword can cut somebody and cut you or kill someone, but the sword that gives life is what I'm about. And I really like the practice that we do, the EI, even the Tamashigiri is wonderful because if the Hasuji, the angle of the edge is correct, you're going to get through the target. And if it's off even a little bit, you don't go through the target, and that's also that, it imitates life. If your edge is under your roof, under your back, under the mune, you're gonna cut through life well. If you're off kilter, man, you're gonna crash. And I certainly have had my crashes in life, but I'm happy that I realized what I needed to do to keep the edge under the back of the sword. The concept of refinement is really paramount in my work. I am like for the better sake of a metaphor, like a Austin Martin, Mercedes-Benz, Ferrari sword maker. I was a Yugo and a Hyundai and a less than perfect sword maker in the beginning. I refined my skills over time, perseverance, just like we do in our martial arts. Weigh them in the same way, And finally, I got to the point that I did not have to look over my shoulder and say, is that what I see? I know what I see. I don't need to look over anymore. In sword making, that is. Other areas, I need some guidance. But I really like the fact that I know exactly what to do. The thing is, in my life, there was no guy down the street making habaki or polishing swords or making koshirai, or tamahagane. I had to make everything. I had to learn how to do everything. I became a jeweler, and I was a jeweler for many years just so I could teach myself how to make the kanagu, the fittings for the sword. And then I became a blacksmith at an antique reproduction hardware house so I could learn how to hammer hot metal and learn about forges. So my path was kind of, askew, but long. And then finally I got to the point where I could make knives and swords and craft all of the fittings. And then my work was accepted and I became a member of the Knife Makers Guild and Bladesmith Society and all of that. And, just made my way through. And finally people started to like my things and made a living at it.
So what do you buy? What do you do with it? How do you end up with a sword?
Well, you call me up. You can go to my website. I'd be glad to make you a sword. Now, the thing is, in order to start making, you have to start wherever your life or talent takes you. I recommend, if you want to be a sword maker, to learn one skill to start with and perfect it. And then while you're perfecting that one skill, let's say forging or polishing, and then you work on the other skills as well. it took me a long time to learn all of the skills, but I had many teachers. I seeked out many teachers. There's there was a handle maker, a really fabulous master, Kono Sensei from Japan, who I learned how to tie the handles from. May he rest. And then I learned how to make the kanagu from my jewelry work, from the jewelry. So I taught myself, and then I studied antique fittings. I have a myriad of antique Suba, Fujikashira, and Minuki that I have a big collection of them, and studying those and knowing why the ana or the hole is on one side for the kozuka and the other side for the kogai, and how it fits on the Suba, fits on the nakago correctly, and how Japanese swords and knives and Japanese sculpture and things are put together without glue. They're pinned, or they fit like a glove, like a matrix. And I had to figure all that stuff out. I was taught much of it, but I also seeked a lot of it out on my own. And it's just so lovely and so valuable to me, the way that the habaki slides on the blade, and the seppa goes in a suba and another seppa, and you put the fittings on the suka, and the saya fits on tight and snug on the habaki. The koiguchi of the saya fits perfectly. And I don't know, I just like all of that. I don't know, I guess Japanese to me are just incredible artisans. And I just resonated with it and just kept doing it and kept doing it and paying attention and reading and watching and going to Japan. I spent 7 years traveling back and forth between Seki and Philly to have my apprenticeship with the Kanafusa lineage. And finally I could make a living. Yeah.
So this isn't just a vibrating sword and a father who brought home something phenomenal. This is your own obsession.
I think you're right. I think you are right. It lit a fire in me. Aikido, first of all, and then the sword when I was a kid, and just the history. My dad taught me so many things. He was a prolific painter, watercolor and oils. And my mother was an incredible chef and a thespian. She was an actress, and I was always around the arts and involved in the arts with people in the arts. So it just made sense for me to just head in that direction. And then, of course, the martial arts, I was really enamored with myself, and I went in that direction. So they meld the sword making and the arts, the martial arts just worked so well together for me.
So I really appreciate you answering how you got there. Now, maybe it's too detailed, or maybe you don't want to give away trade secrets.
No, I'm fine with teaching everything.
So what do you do to make one? What's your order of operations?
Well, if I'm making a traditional sword from scratch, the first thing I do is I'll take the black granulated iron sand, and then I'll make a hole in the yard, in the mud, and make a fire, and then cook the iron into steel, and that makes the tamahagane. That's a long process, and it's very involved. It takes 72 hours to do that, to make a lump of raw tamahagane, and that's an art in itself. And then after that, I take the lump and I'll smush it down flat using modern technology like a power hammer or a hydraulic press. Make it hot, make it like a pancake, and then break it apart and stack it up and make my billet the traditional Japanese way. You can just look it up on YouTube or on a computer somewhere. But the original metal, the tamahagane, you have to break it apart and sort it for porosity and carbon content according to the color and the matrix. So that's a very difficult thing to do, and to know what it looks like at 0.4% carbon or 0.7% carbon, and then put it together in a billet and forge it and draw out a shinobi, which is an unhardened piece of steel ready to become a sword, and then know how to harden it and have it not crack in the water for you. My first teacher let me crack 3 swords before he taught me all the tricks. It's not easy. It's muzukashi, definitely. So difficult. But because my Aikido teacher said I couldn't do it, and because my sword teacher let me break swords, and then my perseverance in needing to learn these arts, I made it. I got my way, I worked my way through.
Did you ever see the show Blue-Eyed Samurai, the cartoon?
Yeah, I did. One of my senior students turned me on to it, and I was pretty amazed. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's never seen it, but I was amazed to find out who the Blue-Eyed Samurai was.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you've got the old blind sword maker who makes her the sword
That's okay.
the
Like,
swords.
amazing. Also,
Yeah,
Zatoichi movies were wonderful.
it's fantastic. Yeah, it's funny because when you mentioned dumping it in the pit to get that heat up, that's the first thing I pictured is that wonderful cartoon. For anyone watching who's a martial artist, you would enjoy that show.
Yeah, that's a cool show. After I make the billet and the shinobi, and then uh, let's say grind off. I use modern tools too. I use an angle grinder with a disc to get the carbon off the surface easily, more easily than using a file or a sen or something as you would in the old days. Um, I call it, if you are a fan of Star Wars, remember when Han Solo was put into carbonite by Jabba the Hutt. That was a block of carbon that he's froze Han Solo in. I call the surface of a sword carbonite, even though it's a made up term. But I grind off the carbon first, and then I get the planes of the sword, the profile. I get the geometry of the sword, the G, the surface, and the shinogi, the line in the side, and then the shinogi G, the surface of the top sides, and the mune, the two top sides. Now there are different shaped mune. There's round mune, and then there's three. There's faceted, but the most common is just a peak mune, and then the two shinogi G's, and then the G. But I start and I get that all correct, and then I do a special technique to prepare the metal before I apply the clay. I mix my own clay. And I do buy a modern like furnace cement because it's easy and cheap rather than dig. I was taught originally by Bill Sensei to dig clay out of the ground, find a deposit, dig it, and use that as your clay. But it's easier to go down to the brick place where they sell bricks and mortar and buy a bucket of mortar, and then I add powdered iron oxide and carbon. I add pieces of the carbon that come off of the anvil and grind it up in a mortar and pestle, and I add that to it as well. And then I'll clay the blade. And I believe that iron ore, that iron oxide, helps the clay hold to the blade because the steel has iron in it, of course, and there's something with the structure of the metal and the iron oxide inside the clay. It helps it hold on to the sword for the hardening process, because the sword goes in the water virtually straight or with a pre-curve a little bit at the nakago, and it goes in the water at 2000 degrees into 90-degree water at straight, and it undulates, and there creates a vapor barrier between the water and the sword from the heat, and then eventually the water touches the blade, and then eventually completely touches the blade. The tip takes a dive in the tank and comes back up, and then it makes the edge hard in the water, and it takes its curve in the water. It's not pre-curved to a full curve katana or wakizashi or any kind of blade. And that process is certainly in the past had been quite nerve-wracking.
Mm.
But it's better now. I was sitting in Tokyo with a very high-level Mukansa smith. Mu is nothing and Kansa is to judge. He's an unjudgeable smith and a very, very famous guy. And I was invited by him to go to his home and visit him and learn some things. We're sitting there in his studio, and he had finished blade, not finished, but blades that have been hardened leaned up against this in this rack on the wall next to where we were working. He was teaching me at the time how to cut horimono, the carvings in the blades, and also teaching me how to make kozuka, the side knife for the katana and the wakizashi. Anyway, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we're just kind of quiet between conversation, and we hear this tick, and one of his blades cracked, and it had been sitting against the wall for probably a couple of days, but it was so much tension in the edge, and he apparently didn't temper that one correctly enough, or made a mistake or whatever in one of the pieces of one of the parts of the process, that it broke. And then he said to me, even monkeys fall out of trees, in Japanese, which I forget exactly. Saru, Wolf Sensei told me the other day how to say that in Japanese. I forgot, but yeah, he said it to me, and how humble must he be to be an unjudgeable Japanese swordsmith, one of the highest, most well sought after Japanese swordsmiths, and to say that and to feel that when that happens.
Love that. I want to go to you real quick, Sensei Suino. When he was talking about that process in the water, it was like you were feeling that. You were just like, whew. Is there anything about that or anything he's talking about as someone who's touched more blades than us? What are you getting excited about with that?
It's such a mysterious moment to those of us who don't make swords. And Sensei Goldberg, without giving away any trade secrets, you said, I think what you said was when you first started that a lot of blades were ruined at that moment of quenching. And now you said it's less of a problem. Without giving away any trade secrets, can you allude to any of the reasons why what have you figured out? What can you do consistently now that keeps them from breaking as often?
Well, it's very important to get the carbon content correct in your sword. Now, you can harden a Japanese sword in water with the right temperature of in the water with the right temperature of the forge, and the right temperature of the water. If you prepare the blade correctly and it has the correct carbon content, you do the clay correctly, you prepare the blade with the correct structure before you put the clay on. There's a whole process that is involved with preparing the blade before you put the clay on the blade to create your hamon. And ha is the edge, and mon is signature or mark of the edge, right? And like your family crest is your mon. Like this one here on my arm is my mon I adopted from Mount Fuji. I found it in a crest book, Japanese book that I have for 20 years, and I adopted it for my work. But it's very difficult, to answer your question, to make no mistakes along the way, because one mistake in any of the preparation prior to heating it up and putting it in the water, your blade will crack, or it'll maybe there's a mislamination in the forging process of the blade, so you get a kizu, like an opening in the side of the blade, or you get a crack on the edge, and that's the crack on the edge is the tough one. But you can take a sword and break it apart in pieces and reforge it into a new piece of metal, but then it's more difficult because of the way that you set up the billet when you make your sword. Now, I do all of my swords kobuse with a iron core, and some of the swords have 4 layers, 2 on each side, and then an iron core in the middle. Some have 3 on the outside. Some are U-shaped and have the high carbon steel on the edge and less on the top. There's many different ways to create the initial billet before you pull out the shinobi, and then you have to deal with the boshi, the kisaki. It's very difficult. If I may just grab a sword. This is probably one of the finest pieces I've ever made in my life, and it's, as you can see, it's quite a long blade. The habaki is here and the tip is out here. I would say, I can't remember. I haven't measured it in a while, but it's probably a 2.7, and it's got an okisaki. Making an okisaki on a long sword with a choji hamon. It's got a choji hamon.
Gorgeous.
This is I don't call myself a master because I'm not. I've been doing this for 40 years. I make nice looking blades. They work well. They don't break so easily. But this is one of my finest swords ever. And I'm going to pass it down to my son, I believe. But I also do swords of that quality that I do sell. This is another one with a magnificent hummel. Let's see, can you see it there?
Yep, we're
Yes,
getting
yep.
as you
Now we got
rotate.
This is a lively choji style, flame style hummel. And this is about it's got a chu kisaki, a middle length kisaki, and quite a nice geometry and polish. This is about I don't know, I want to say $17,000 sword. My sword started about 5K and go up. I'm in Manhattan at this store that I sold my swords at many years ago, and the woman comes in, and it's Robin Williams' wife. And she says to the clerk, I want to buy my husband a sword for his birthday. And she said, we happen to have half a dozen samurai swords right here. She goes, well, I'm not sure that I want to buy one of those. I'd like to have one made for him. So I'm at my shop in Philly. I get a call on the phone, and it's this Brazilian woman who runs this head fund guy's toy store. And said, David, I have this woman here. She'd like to buy a sword for her husband. I said, there's great. There's 6 of them there. No, she wants you to make one. This is November 1st. And she says, she gets on the phone. Hello, I'd like to get a sword made for my husband for Christmas. And I said, this Christmas, you want a sword from scratch? And she said, well, yes. I said, well, there's a bunch of them right there on the wall. You know, you can buy one of those. And she goes, no, I want to make him a special one. I said, okay. We start out with color. What color does he like? What clothes does he wear? Well, and he really likes brown, navy blue, and gold. So I ended up making him, I covered the saya in alligator skin, brown alligator skin, and did blue same, the skin stingray, and I wrapped it with gold ito, Japanese ito. And but I made this one for him with monkeys because I asked her what's his favorite animal. We have to have a theme for the kanagu for the fittings. She said monkeys. So I did hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil monkeys for the manuki under the wrap. And on the suba, I did a 3-dimensional monkey climbing up a bamboo fence. And on the back of the sword, I did a gorilla eating bamboo. And then on the fuchi by the suba, I did a Japanese guy with long hair kind of changing from a gorilla to a man eating a bowl of miso soup. And that was the most expensive sword I had made to date. That was 10K. And it was quite an honor to make a sword for that guy. I really enjoyed his work. He was a heck of a wonderful actor.
Amazing.
He's brilliant. That's amazing. Sensei, we are now at the point in the show where you get our 10 questions.
Okay.
So you have 10 minutes to answer 10 questions. If you don't get through all of them, that's on you. If you do, that's great. We ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but feel free to expand on your answers if you wish.
Sure.
What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Irimi. Entering.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Mitsugi Saotome Shihan.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time and why?
Well, I actually think Bruce Lee, because he was the most famous guy that did the most incredible stuff from being a real person. I remember it was just Shodan when Seagal's first movie came out. That was quite fun to see and entertaining. I like what he has done for Aikido, and certainly in the beginning. But I would say Lee Chan. Jackie Chan is quite talented and really excellent. And so we'll just go with those guys.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training? And I'll add in for you and your sword making.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting back on the mat with my teacher and my senpai, doing training. I'm joining this next week, actually. I'll be joining our Baltimore dojo, the ASU organization. Two of my senpais, seven Dan senpais, run that dojo, and I'm happy to say that I'll be joining that dojo now that I'm finally settled in after being here from August of last year to the new dojo. I'm excited about practicing again every week with those people, and also practicing with Wolf Sensei in his sword arts, and also the calligraphy with Bailey Sensei at his dojo. So that's very exciting for me. And my wife is going to come with me and learn the calligraphy too, and that's quite exciting.
Pardon me, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Well, Goldberg, you made it, and we're happy that you're here. And I'll give you the most lavish, lovely place to live, but make me a sword first.
What's the line in Kill Bill? If she meets God on the way, God will be cut with the Hattori Hanzo sword.
Right, right.
Yeah. Accepting their influence, do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, even if they're not great at martial arts in real life?
A favorite film?
Or television martial artist, even if the actor isn't necessarily great in real life?
Well, there's quite a few, but I'll go to this one. Um, I like the Jackie Chan version of when he's the maintenance man in China, and that young boy, I think it's Will Smith's son, comes and learns to hang his coat up on the hook, and become the fellow that can stand in front of the snake and climb the mountain. I really love that film, that particular version of that film, although the first one was great too. So I'd say him.
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, even if they don't train, what benefit would they be getting?
Be happy.
Hmm.
And help people. Help anyone that needs the help. And my mother will always say, I don't care about then. I don't care about then, meaning later. I care about now. And that resonates for me.
Is there a martial artist, living or dead, in all of recorded history you'd like to train with the most?
I really enjoy training with my teacher, Mitsugi Saotome Sensei. I find every time I'm with him, I I glean new things that I have never understood before. I find new ways to understand what he's taught me all along, but I didn't know yet. I'm sure that I could train with many different highly skilled gentlemen such as yourselves and enjoy it very much. But I must say, training with Mitsugi Saotome is a gift. I'm just delighted to be with him every time.
You have two more questions, but I want to say that every one of us basically said the same, that we just need more time with our teachers. Because life's too short. Our last two questions come as a pair, Sensei. What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
I don't have any regrets because, like my mother said, I don't care about then. I don't care about that. I care about now. And my greatest achievement is marrying the most wonderful woman in the world to me, and being able to still be with her and be in love every day. Morna, my wife.
Sorry, I interrupted her name. I want to make sure we hear it.
Morna, she's an Irish descent, and Morna O'Neill Goldberg.
Good Irish name.
Yeah.
Damn
Good
Irish
Irish
people.
name.
Damn Irish people.
Yeah.
Ireland is a lovely place. If you haven't gone, I'd recommend it highly.
Sensei Suino, Takafume Mitsuzuka has written in the comments, and I believe he's translated that earlier saying. Would you read that for us in Japanese?
Saru mo ki kara ochiru. Saru is monkey. Saru mo, monkeys also fall from trees.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Domo arigato
Well,
gozaimashita, Takafumi-san.
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Takafume. It's nice to meet you on the show, and thank you for writing in with that. Sensei, we have time for one more question, and it's for you, Sensei Goldberg, before we do what we call going around the horn. Is sword making in danger of perishing?
No, because I pass on everything I know. And there are other teachers, other sensei who do as well in Japan and around the world. I have learned to give of myself in a way that I don't care if I get anything back, because it's just like not having to worry about looking over my shoulder anymore. I love what I do and I pass it on. Takafumi is my uchideshi or my sotodeshi. He comes and lives here 3 days a week and learns sword making, as do some other students as well. But I just am grateful to be able to give what I have, to pass on my knowledge. And I know by passing it on in the way I do and the way it's been passed to me that it will continue.
And let me expand on one idea. You mentioned that about your mom. Know then, now. And that you have no regrets. And as someone who still has regrets, I would argue your greatest achievement is having no regrets, not to disparage your wife, of course.
No, she's absolutely right though too.
Right, but you understand what I'm saying? To
I do.
think that and to think I'm going to pass on without expectation is beautiful. And a 10-year-old could say those things. How have you arrived at that place in action?
I think being humble from the martial training that I've had for the past 40 years, and also my teachers letting me make mistakes like breaking the swords and saying that I couldn't do things, and throwing me down and I'll get up again, and all the ukemi that I've taken in all these years. I think all of that together is, for me, the trick. For me, has worked to help me come to this place. You repeated the part about the regrets. I mean, certainly I wish I would have learned to speak Japanese better. Skoshi Nihongo Hanashimasu. I can ask, may I have 2 tickets for the train? Where is this place? May I have a beer? How much is this? Like kind of get around kind of Japanese. But I would love to speak Japanese fluently. I'm grateful that my apprentice Takafumi is helping me learn a little bit of Japanese better than I know it. I'm very excited to train calligraphy with Bailey Sensei and Wolf Sensei's dojo. That's very, very exciting to me. But as to regret any of the things that I didn't do would be to hold on to it. I'm not holding on to anything, I'm just here now and just doing the best I can.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. And also, your mom having been an actor, it's been said that actors are God's chosen ones, and that I would argue has a bit to do with it. Sensei Suino's smiling because that's how I make a living. So I'm
Oh,
being,
right. I remember Wolf Sensei told me you were an actor.
it's not important, but it is how I make my
No,
living. And
it's
that's why I
important.
know
It's
we're God's
wonderful.
chosen
You're from
ones.
Canada, yeah?
I'm from
Hey.
Canada, eh?
Hey, all
Hey,
right.
bud.
Yeah. You know what? I love Canadians. My wife is Canadian. But it's cool that, here we are. You're Canadian. Are any other of you fellas Canadian? There you go. All right. We got some Americanos and some Canadians.
Actor mom, Canadian wife, you've chosen well, sir. So this is the point in the show where we do what we call going around the horn. So we're going to start with Hanshi Legacy, and we're going to talk a little bit about our time with you and our experience with you. And then the last word and the saying of good night, that will go to you. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you to the people who keep this show running behind the scenes, Punch Kick Choke Chat team, Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedeshev, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landol, Drita Guliani, Stavros Stavroulias, and Emily Ruth Driscoll. Thank you, team. Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight with Sensei Goldberg?
Wow, great time. I've never really talked to anybody who did this. It sounds fantastic. I have, like I said, I have a 1650 sword, and I'm hoping that you, when we go off the air, that you hang on for a second because I'm
Absolutely.
going to hold up my
Two
phone.
things I do. My two lines of work is I make swords and I restore original Japanese Nihonto as my job. So I'm very honored and glad to help you, Sensei.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you for coming on our show. It was one of the great ones.
Thank you so much.
And before we go to Sensei Suino, a Derringer and $130 for a sword from 1650. How'd you do?
Pretty darn good. Pretty darn good,
Would you
Sensei.
make that deal 10 out of 10 times, Sensei Goldberg?
Oh, absolutely. I like Derringers too. It's always fun to carry a little pocket pistol.
Yeah.
Sensei Suino, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
I don't know where to start. Super fun, man. The listening to a human being who's good at sword making talk about his work is a really gratifying experience. I've had that conversation in Japan with Japanese swordsmiths, but there's always the language barrier, so you get 50% of it or 60% of it, and it's been amazing. But seeing photographs of your work, Sensei, and then talking to you, there's this crazy magic. Like a human being can make that stuff. It's really cool.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
super
you for those
gratifying.
people.
Thank you so much. I love the conversation, and I know we'll be talking more.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dauphin?
Goldberg Sensei, last time I was in Japan with Suino Sensei, we went to this really high-end sushi restaurant, and I asked Suino to ask the sushi chef about his knives, and he freaked out and got all these knives out and started talking about like where
Cool.
they were made. And what I did is when we went the next day, we went to the place. I brought my wife back. I'm one of the only husbands. I brought my wife back a handmade sushi knife from Japan,
Lovely.
which is kind of as we were talking about this. I was thinking about this a lot, like just going there and seeing that. But some of the things you said, the sword and Aikido go hand in hand. You must know the sword to understand Aikido and maybe all martial arts. I'm going to pontificate on that for a long time. When we have these conversations, people say things, and I just think about it for sometimes years after that just stuck with me at the beginning, and I know it's going to stay with me for a while. Um, I really hope one day we can see that World War II sword that your dad brought back. Do you still have that? It would be
I still
awesome.
do. Yeah, it's right here on the wall. I can show it to you if you'd like to take a look.
We got to wrap this up, but I
Yeah, okay,
really want
another
to.
time.
Yeah, for
Certainly.
sure, for sure. Um, it's interesting that you joined martial arts. Your path into martial arts was the same as mine. So you joined in university days, as did I, with a person named Jason Evans who said, he's listening to me talk and he said, "You need to go do this. Come meet this karate teacher." And he was talking about Sensei Legacy. He didn't say I had to do karate. He wanted me to meet this karate teacher. So it's kind of interesting that we had the same path in. Um, uh, I like that when you said that your one teacher said, "Don't show this out. This is in our lineage only." I guess martial arts secrets are real. Like they were real and they are real. I love that.
Yeah,
Uh,
for me, they definitely are. You have to keep some things close to the chest, I suppose.
right. Um, You said, I get to make swords for a living. How cool is that? And I want to say that's fucking cool. Like that's fucking
Thanks.
cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I like it.
um, Forging, polishing, hand making, these are all the one thing I learned is I just thought every sword maker knows all of those things. And one of the main things I learned tonight is that no, some of them only know one element of that, and that's an art onto itself. Um,
Yes,
the way you described putting the habaki and
the
the
spacers.
Matsuki and those things, just the way you described it with such reverence. It's the same way as, I guess, a perfect throw or doing a kata, or since some of us are bikers,
Yes.
rolling on the throttle into a turn. Like it just
Yeah,
creates
my
this,
wife is a gnarly bike rider.
Nice.
a 96-inch fat bomb, and man, she just drag her foot and just right away. Oh man, she's so sexy.
I liked a bunch of the answers to your questions. The most effective move entering Bruce Lee. Sensei Legacy said Bruce Lee. Um, next 5 years, getting on the mat with your sensei and your senpai. Who you want to train with, just your sensei more. I loved all this. I had such a good time listening to you. Uh, this is probably one of those ones I'm going to watch again because there's lots of information I know that I missed that I want to pick up on more. And I really feel strongly we're going to meet each other in person, Sensei Goldberg, and I look forward to that day.
I look forward to meeting you and all of you, senseis. I invite you all to come to the smithy, make a sword with me. I'm doing that with Wolf Sensei presently, and it would be my honor to have you guys come by and do that.
Well, maybe we'll ride down on
Yeah, good.
motorcycles.
That's cool.
Sensei, I get to chat so much during the show, but I made a joke about it, but the way you talked about revering the edge, it wasn't really a joke. That's something I seek in my life. It's also something I seek in my martial arts, and it's something you describe both metaphorically and literally in a way that as I ponder and breathe and do whatever purifications I do, I'm going to be considering the edge for the next while. And I just want to say I really appreciate that because that's such a simple and deep concept all at once. And thank you for our time tonight. As Hanshi said, this was just such a flow. And I've never met you, and I look forward to meeting you in person. How do you want to say goodnight to all of our listeners?
Oyasumi nasai. Have a good night. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful that you all watched and were part of this with us. And as I said before, I'm grateful to have been invited. So nice to be here.
Thanks, Sensei. Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Don't go away.